Hi Year 7. I thought I'd do a little video to help you with your assessment today, and it's been a very long time since I've seen you, so I thought I'd pop on very quickly to the webcam and say hello. I hope everyone's doing really well. I really miss you all, and there's not long left of term, so I'm sure you're all really looking forward to your summer holiday. Now I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to help you get on with your lesson. Nice to see you all. So today you are going to be writing about a poem that links to what you were doing last lesson. So you remember last lesson you were doing a bit of research on the 1950s. You were learning about the 1950s rather, and the welfare state and what that was all about. So you might want to do a little bit of recapping now just by looking back in your book. Remind yourself that the welfare state was all about what happened after the war in Britain to help people get back on their feet. It involved setting up the NHS, it involved setting up some social security to help people get more money, it helped by getting people into employment and making the country, or helping the country to recover after the war. So you're going to be remembering that, and you're going to be reading a poem today that is based at that time. So today's poem, written in the 50s, gives us a picture of what life was still like for some children following the war. Because although the war ended in 1949, the effects of it lasted for a lot longer afterwards. There was still rationing of food well into the 1950s. And so people didn't snap back. Lots of people suffered for a long time. And Cosley, he's the poet, was often asked if the poem was based on a real boy, and he said, "My God, he certainly was. Poor boy, I don't know where he is now. I was thunderstruck when people thought I'd made it up. He was a real bloke. Poor little devil." So what that really makes us think is that the poem that we're about to read is about somebody who really did exist, and that is going to make it a bit more emotional for us, I think, when we read it. So the poem is called Timothy Winters, that's the name of the boy, by Charles Cosley. So here's the poem here. Read the poem through a few times and look at all the words which have been explained. So I'm going to read it to you. Timothy Winters comes to school with eyes as wide as a football pool, ears like bombs and teeth like splinters. The blitz of a boy is Timothy Winters. His belly is white, his neck is dark, and his hair is an exclamation mark. His clothes are enough to scare a crow, and through his breeches the blue winds blow. His breeches are trousers. When the teacher talks, he won't hear a word, and he shoots down dead the arithmetic bird. So arithmetic is maths. He licks the pattern off his plate, and he's not even heard of the welfare state. Timothy Winters has bloody feet, and he lives in a house on Suez Street, so that's a very poor street. He sleeps in a sack on the kitchen floor, and they say there aren't boys like him anymore. Old Man Winters, that's his dad, likes his beer, and his missus ran off with a bombardier, a soldier, so he doesn't have a mum at home. Grandma sits in the grate with a gin, and Timothy's dosed with aspirin. So Timothy's obviously given a lot of drugs, a little bit like paracetamol, so he's obviously not very well. The welfare worker lies awake, but the law's as tricky as a 10-foot snake. So Timothy Winters drinks his cup and slowly goes on growing up. At morning prayers, who's in school now, the master helves, the head teacher prays for children less fortunate than ourselves. And the loudest response in the room is when Timothy Winters roars, "Amen." So come one angel, come on 10, Timothy Winters says, "Amen." Amen, 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 amen. Timothy Winters, Lord, amen. So when they're praying in school for people less fortunate, Timothy Winters is obviously very much less fortunate than lots of his friends, which is why he's roaring amen. He's praying really, really hard for somebody to help him, for God to help him. So from that poem, we learn about a boy who's clearly very, very poor. So he's got ears like bombs and teeth like splinters. So he's obviously got pretty bad dental hygiene. And it's described as a blitz of a boy. So the blitz was when you learned from in last lesson, when lots of cities in Britain were destroyed by German fighter pilots. So he's saying that he's almost like he's been destroyed himself. And he wears poor clothes because it's like scarecrow clothes. And he really struggles in school, so he struggles with maths because he can't really concentrate. He's obviously not eating enough to concentrate properly. And then when he's in school, he licks the pattern off his plate. So he eats all his food in school, and probably he doesn't get much when he's at home. And it says there he's not heard of the welfare state. So despite that being set up, it's obviously very hard for it to work, and his family aren't getting the support they need. And later on in the poem, it says, the welfare worker lies awake, but the law's as tricky as a 10-foot snake. Now that is telling us that people are trying to get money and support to these families, but it's very tricky, and there are lots of them. The law's as tricky as a 10-foot snake. That tells us that it's very complicated business to try to support people properly. So despite wanting to help, obviously some families don't get the support they need, like Timothy Winter's family. So the next part, I'm going to let you do this yourself. You're going to watch this animation. So the second part, is not really about the poem. It doesn't reflect the poem, but it gives you somebody's ideas. So you're going to pause my video now, and you're going to watch this video on YouTube. And that's going to help you understand the poem even more. Okay, so now that you've watched that animation, and we've read the poem together and we've talked about it a little bit, you're going to start your task. And your task is the assessment for this unit. You're going to have today and next lesson to finish your assessment. And you're going to write as much as you can about the poem. And you're going to be answering this question here. What impression do you get of Timothy Winters from the poem? So basically, what can you tell me about Timothy Winters? And you're going to write about 3 things. What he looks like, what he behaves like at school, and what life is like at home. So those are 3 things that are going to tell you about that main character of the poem. And you're getting very good at this now. You're going to write in C's paragraphs. So this is going to help you use quotations. It's going to help you talk about the key words from the poem. And it's going to help you talk about the context. Now, remember, the context is what was happening at the time it was written. So that's all about 1950s Britain, after the war, and the welfare state. And there's a helpful tip here. If you don't know what bits of the poems to write about, you're going to write about the bits that are already highlighted in blue, and that will help you. Now, I'm going to look at 2 example C's paragraphs here. And this is going to remind you of what you're aiming for, because you're all very good at writing a basic C's paragraph now. And my feedback to lots of you after the last assessment was that you're doing the basics really well, but you need to be pushing yourselves now to do that little bit extra. So I want you to listen carefully and see what you can do extra in these C's paragraphs to improve from last time. So this first example is a good C's paragraph. We'd say this is a good basic C's paragraph. So I'm going to put basic on there as well. So it's broken down into all the different bits, the S, the E, the I, the Z, and the E. So in the poem, it describes the way Timothy Winters looks. That's a good statement. It says what you think. And the next bit is the evidence. It says he has eyes as wide as a football pool. So this is good evidence because it puts a quote in and it uses quote marks. Now we go into the inference in purple. This suggests that he has very large eyes which are wide open. And that's a good inference because it explains what the quotation suggests to you. So it shows that you understand that quote. It shows that you understand that eyes being wide as a football pool means that they're wide open. And then we get into the zoom where we talk about certain words from the quote. The words football pool tell us that Timothy looks a bit unusual because it's like his eyes are popping out of his head. And you might think about why his eyes might look like they're popping out of his head. Probably because he's very scrawny and skinny and he's not eaten enough. So therefore, by comparison, his eyes look quite big. So that's good because it's zoomed in on an important word. It's zoomed in on football pool. And then the bit in black is the context where you link it to what you learned last time. The writer might be suggesting that after World War II, there were still many people living difficult lives, and the reader will probably be a bit shocked. Okay, so this is kind of how you've all been writing. You're all really good at this now. So what I want you to think is, how can I make my paragraph more like the next example? So this is an example of an excellent paragraph. And you can see it's still broken down into S, E, I, Z, E. But it's a little bit longer, isn't it? And it's got a bit more in it, so let's see. So statement. In the poem, Timothy Winters is presented as a rather strange looking boy. So this is an even better statement because it says what you think about the poem. Now it's got the same quotation as last time. The poet, Charles Causley, describes him as having eyes as wide as a football pool. So it's better because it tells us the poet's name, but it's got the same quote. And then inference. This suggests that he might look shocked or a bit frightened because his eyes are so wide open. So this inference is just a little bit longer and it's got a bit more detail in it. It says shocked or frightened. And that shows that you've thought about why his eyes are wide open and you've given your opinion. And then this zoom has got a bit more detail. It uses simile, so it uses subject terminology, which is better. The simile, comparing his eyes to a football pool, might also suggest that Timothy is exhausted and unwell because it's like his eyes are popping out of his head, which is how people look when they are really tired or hungry. So that just gives, and this is what I've been saying to lots of you in your Zoom or your inference sentence, just say a little bit more, add another sentence or add another bit of your sentence to give a bit more of an explanation about what you mean. And that's what this one does here because it's a bit longer than the last one. And now the Explore has got a bit more information about 1950s Britain. It says, after World War II, there were still many people like Timothy Winters who were living difficult lives in the UK. And the start of the poem helps us to realise that Timothy seems out of place at school because of his poverty. Perhaps he has been struggling to eat and sleep at home. So this is similar to the last one, but it just gives a little bit more detail, which shows that you have a greater understanding. So what I would suggest you do now is you go back and look at the first example and just compare them again. Make sure you know what you're going to do to make sure you're writing excellent C's paragraphs. Now, the next slide has got a reminder. This help sheet's got a reminder of how you start your C's paragraphs. So if you're at all unsure, you're going to use these sentence starters here to help you, okay? And then this is just the slide that tells you, okay, this is your assessment, now you're going to get started. The question that you're answering is, what impression do you get of Timothy Winters? You're going to write one C's paragraph about what he looks like. You're going to write one C's paragraph about what he's like at school. And you're going to write a third one about what life is like at home for him. Okay, so that's 3 C's paragraphs across today's lesson and next lesson. So you can divide it out and spread your time so you're taking enough time to make them really good. Now, if you were really struggling with C's paragraphs, just write everything you think about Timothy. But to be honest, Year 7, you're really good at writing C's paragraphs, so I don't think there's going to be almost anybody who can't write in C's paragraphs. What I really want you to do is think about how to make them excellent. And remember, if you don't know what bits to write about, go back to the slide that's got the poem on it and take some of the blue bits. That's a little bit of a hint at bits that would help you. Okay? I hope this video was helpful. Remember, you've got today's lesson and next lesson to do this, and I'll make that clear and show my homework as well. Okay, good luck with your assessment.